Hey there guys, Dustfoe here. Today what I got for you is the Dunright Inc. Buckskin Bills Grain Dust Mask, a variant of the Mine Safety Appliances Dustfoe number 77. Getting into the history, Mine Safety Appliances started the Dustfoe series in the 1930s. The first Dustfoes were this kind of alien shape by today's standards, but back in the 1930s, when things were first getting figured out, the Dustfoe managed to be effective and popular enough to warrant a series of upgrades and revisions over the decades. That eventually led to the Dustfoe number 66, which, if my understanding is correct, is essentially just a beefed-up version of the Dustfoe number 55. Unfortunately, I don't have one of those to show you today, but I do have this. As you can see, it's pretty much just a modernization of that original Dustfoe I showed you. It retains a lot of the details from the original Dustfoe, like the general facepiece shape, kind of, the fact that it's metal, and that sponge rubber peripheral seal, but a lot of the components, well, pretty much all of them, are upgraded to fit a more modern mask. These things were entirely defective due to a number of issues. Specifically, the peripheral seal would tend to lose its shape and deform, causing breaches in the seal. The edges of the metal facepiece were also actually sharp enough to cut into the peripheral seal, reducing its effectiveness. And you also just couldn't test to see if it was actually working because you couldn't pressure test it. It was just straight up impossible. Anyhow, why don't we actually talk about the mask I'm here to talk about today? In 1967, Mine Safety Appliances released the Dustfoe number 77. This thing kind of left the original style of the Dustfoe series in favor of this incredibly unique casket-shaped filter. And MSA continued selling the Dustfoe 77 until the late 90s, early 2000s-ish. I'm not sure of an exact year there, sorry about that. But the Dustfoe number 77 usually uses a kind of pale brown plastic instead of this bright orange one. The reason for this one being orange instead of the usual brown is because this one was manufactured specifically for a distributor. That distributor being Dunright Inc. of Fremont, Nebraska. Dunright Inc. is a small-scale industrial supply company that is actually still around today. I don't know if they're still using him, but their mascot at least used to be this fella named Buckskin Bill, who is this character of an early American trapper or survivalist, you know, a pioneer, really. And you can see him right on the front of the mask there. And so Dunright had a series of different products under the name of Buckskin Bills. And this is, of course, one of them. Anyhow, it seems that Dunright was actually selling these back during the 80s and 90s, maybe a little later, maybe a little earlier. I'm not sure. I can only find references to this thing from, I think it was like 89 and 93. And what's interesting about those references is that they were actually in magazines advertising these things as mail order. So Dunright, despite being a rather small operation, was actually selling these all across the country. Some of you might be wondering why MSA, a massive company, would need a distributor. And there are a number of reasons. For instance, you could get into new regions, or you could piggyback off of this distributor's advertising so you don't have to spend as much money doing that. Or there's what I think this is, and that's kind of complicated to explain. What I'm talking about is, well, if you've got a company that specializes in something like grain, as Dunright seemed to, they seemed to have been primarily a grain industry supply company. So if you're buying grain industry equipment from Dunright, you expect them to know what kind of PPE is needed for that industry. And so if they're also selling Buckskin Bill's grain dust mask, you will think like, well, this is the mask for doing that. And so that's what I think this is particularly. And so anyways, why don't I actually dissect this thing and show you all of its little components? This thing is interesting because the face piece is this plastic filter compartment, which is largely empty space actually, and then a rubber peripheral seal. I'll show you that in a bit more depth in a minute here, but first I want to take a look at this head harness. It is a 2-point design, or I guess like pseudo 4-point, because one part of the strap goes over the top of the head and the other goes under the ears. It is removable, which is easily done by just unclipping it from these little points here, and on the other side right there. So yeah, here it is off the head and with the head harness removed. As you can see, the inlets are just these little cuts in the plastic shell there. And then on the bottom is your exhale valve, but the lighting isn't getting in there, so I'll have to show you that in a minute. Quickly going to the inside, you can see the peripheral seal is just a classic interned piece of rubber. Oh, and there's a little date stamp on the inside there. Yeah, it says it was made in 1986, but it's kind of hard to see exactly what month. Also stamped on the inside, it has part numbers for an orange face piece. Let's see if it'll focus. And then a black one up there. Is that focusing? There we go. Black is abbreviated to BLK in this case. And then over here, tan. There we go. Oh, no, not focusing. Come on. Oh my god, there we go. But yeah, so deep in there, you've got your inlet valve right in the front, and then your exhale valve at the bottom. Yeah, and that's the inside. So I will show you how the filter works. At the bottom here, you've got these two pegs. If you press down, that assembly just pops right up, and then you can just swing it open like a door until this locking lug in the top here comes free. It's got a little slot in the top of the actual face piece assembly. Yeah, and then it just opens up, drops your filter out, and you can change it. I realize I never gave you guys a close-up of Buckskin Bill. Here he is. That's the guy. Oh, and yeah, immediately below that, it just says Dustfoe 77. And then the inside of this compartment is very simple. It's just ribbed for airflow. You can also see a bunch of, like, dust and grime in there. That's because this thing is very well used. In fact, you can see just how used this thing is. It's entirely saturated with dust. As you can see, that's the intended color of the filter. But yeah, in the center there, you can see, well, done right. Usually that says MSA. Then the other side of the filter is just an empty space meant to interface with the actual face piece. The face piece also has all sorts of ribbing for airflow, and then you can see your inlet valve there, which mine is kind of bunched up for some reason. There we go, fixed that. And then on the bottom, there's that exhale valve I mentioned. Oh yeah, something I forgot to mention about this filter is that it actually kind of works like a gasket at some places. You can see a very distinct line where dust hasn't gotten through or gotten to the filter at all, and that's because it's where this thing holds it. And speaking of holding it, this is how you install a new filter. You just put it in this part of the mask, and then lead it in like that, and then close it. And with that, I think that's everything I wanted to say about this thing. I hope you guys found this video at least a little entertaining. I'm sure, you know, Done Right Inc. of Fremont, Nebraska probably isn't all that interesting to you, but I absolutely love this kind of really obscure stuff. And, you know, this was a rare variant of a mask that I've been looking for a while, so I figured why not scoop it up and show it to you guys. Oh, and let me know if you guys want to see other videos about the Dustfoe series. I don't believe I talked about the 88 yet, which honestly I don't have one, so couldn't do a video on that. But the Dustfoe number 66 here, that one's really interesting because it sucked really bad and it led to MSA getting sued multiple times. So that could be a fun video to make. But yeah, let me know if you guys want to see that. But anyhow, thank you guys very much for watching. I will see you in the next one, whenever that is.